Today with me on the podcast, I have Emma. Good morning, Emma. How are you?
Morning, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Just splendid. I dropped all three kids off and not a single one cried when I left. So I am on cloud nine and very surprised at the morning. There was no
That is a
fighting, no
huge win.
nothing. It was amazing.
Massive win.
Maybe everyone needs a long weekend, I think. Emma's had three pregnancies and two births. Um, I'm just going to kick it over to you and start where you feel comfortable. Talk us through your trauma experience.
Cool. So my it's largely related to my first pregnancy. So planned baby, very lucky, happened to get pregnant pretty quickly. Uh, we found out, and then 2 days later we went into COVID lockdown. So the majority of my first trimester was stuck at home, which in some ways made it kind of easier because I wasn't having to, hide a pregnancy or, for people if I weren't telling them because I wasn't feeling particularly well. But the stresses slightly of the logistics of being able to see midwives and doctor's appointments and things like that. So that was all a bit complicated. And then I think just physically, pregnancy and I don't go hand in hand anyway. It's not something I enjoy. I feel pretty sick. Uh, just not particularly fun. Had a few ups and downs with blood pressure, but it was sort of just left alone, just kind of monitored. Oh, I should caveat at this stage that this pregnancy was overseas, so not in New Zealand. We were
Oh.
in a small island called Guernsey, which is between England and France. And yeah, kind of trucked along for the majority of the pregnancy until we hit 35 weeks. So the difference over there is that they don't do L&Cs. So we had different midwives throughout. So you're not building a relationship with anyone. And it so happened that the midwife that we had at 35 weeks, who was doing my fundal measurement of my belly, noticed an irregularity. So she was like, look, it might be nothing, but we'll send you for an ultrasound. So at that point, I hadn't had an ultrasound since the usual 20 weeks anatomy scan. So we went along. The ultrasound technician sort of said, the baby does look on the smaller side, but, I don't think it's a big deal. She was pretty upbeat, positive, quite blasé about it, but was like, look, I will just send you up to speak to an obstetrician just to, be sure. So we were kind of heading up there thinking, there's no big deal. They're just being, overcautious. Often the ultrasounds measure incorrectly anyway, kind of really, just kind of like laughing and joking, like it's all fine. And then we saw the obstetrician with one of the midwives on the ward, and it kind of instantly changed sort of in a moment. They talked about just how small my son was.
And this is the first time you've heard anything about this?
Literally the first time. And I can picture the midwife's face that was with us in the room. So I'd never met this young lady before in my life. Like, she was completely new to us, and it just kind of almost saw the color drained out of her face, like, and a look of panic. And so at that point, we hadn't really been worried. And then it was suddenly very serious. That first time we heard about fetal growth restriction being mentioned, like I'd never heard about that before. And it was just suddenly this kind of panic about his size and his growth, and talking about the risks in relation to that, and particularly around stillbirth. So it was from that point onwards, I've lost track, tried to think about it, the amount of times that we were told the risks around him dying, basically.
By different people or the same person throughout this thing?
Different people. So from that point on, we had to wait 2 weeks before it was officially confirmed that he had the growth restriction, because that's the minimum period they'll wait between scans. So that 2 week period was fairly horrendous waiting around.
Yeah.
And the difference, so if we were up on the ward, you're seeing a different midwife every time, and then they're going through with you again. It's kind of every time you see someone, the risks around basically him dying. And I kind of remember, I guess, this awful sense of responsibility, because again, it was like really emphasized that if there were any changes, we needed to come in straight away. And it felt really isolating, because even though like my husband was with me for a lot of the appointments, not all of them, he wasn't the one having to make any of those decisions. Like, I was then second guessing every little movement. Had he moved enough that day?
Yeah.
And that share responsibility, okay, well, if something goes wrong, that's on me. And what if I miss something? And also being my first pregnancy, I had no benchmark. I had nothing to compare it to. So was this normal? Was it not normal? And it felt, I think, really isolating around, oh my God, this is on me. This, if something goes
Just the
wrong.
pressure, eh? The pressure is like immense. Being like,
Yeah.
I'm the one that can feel them, because, yeah, it's just, you're the one that's pregnant, so you're the one that can feel everything. Only imagine the pressure, eh?
Yeah, it was a lot. And once it was confirmed after that 2 week period, it was literally put to us, either you need to be induced right now, or you have to come in every day for monitoring. And the latest we'll let you go is 38 weeks. So that was a week. We were given grace if we wanted to. But again, that decision was put back on us. And so it just, again, felt like another huge responsibility. Like, if we wait this extra week, is something awful going to happen? Because again, it was then hammered in, hammered in, hammered in. He might die, he might die, he might die. And that, to me, I think was the biggest trauma of it all, was the fear, the constant fear of him dying, and feeling really powerless and out of control. Like, that felt like there was very little we could do. It was just kind of a waiting game, and it may happen, it may not, but there's not really anything that will change that.
Were you working at this stage still, or had you finished work, or?
Yeah, so I worked, I'm trying to think of the timing. So I was still working when we found out. I probably finished work probably just after it was confirmed. So just over 37 weeks, I finished. I had planned to finish at 38, but I think I finished, just given everything that was going on, I finished a touch earlier. But yeah, again, I was working while still feeling really anxious about what was going on, particularly when we had to wait for that second scan. And yeah, I don't know that my work colleagues really got it either.
Did you tell them what was going on, or not really?
So my manager was away at that point, so she wasn't there. I think, most of my, like, the close colleagues that I work with within my team, given the nature of what I was doing at that time in social work, people are run off their feet. I guess similar to midwifery in a sense. There's a lot of burnout. There's a lot of people kind of firefighting. I think everyone was probably preoccupied with their own stuff. So I don't judge anyone for that, but I think it kind of added into that feeling of isolation at that time.
Yeah. And how was COVID at this stage of the pregnancy? Like, what was there, restrictions over there, or nothing, or?
So we were out of restrictions, but it was the summer. So as a lot of people were then traveling again, the COVID rates were increasing. So I remember again feeling really anxious about what to do with the COVID vaccination as well, because that was being offered for pregnant women at the time, and it was this whole back and forth around should I, shouldn't I? In the end, because I could feel myself feeling anxious about getting COVID, so in the end, I did
Yeah.
choose to be vaccinated. But then, which was before actually all of this came about, but then that was one of the things that fed into, I guess, this self blame or this spiraling of what have I done to cause this? So it was, oh, well, I got the vaccine. Did I exercise too much? Did I don't know, eat the wrong thing? Your mind just kind of spirals of did I
Yeah.
do something or not do something to have potentially caused this issue, because we were never given any kind of answers in terms of what might be behind it. There was no
Yeah.
discussion around placenta functioning or anything like that. So it was just kind of this wild unknown of this thing's just happened out of nowhere. And no, so powerless to do anything to change it or to know what was the reason behind it. So my kind of automatic thing was to blame myself, that it must have been something that I've done or not done to cause him to stop growing. Yeah.
It's heavy, eh?
So
It's a lot.
yeah, and it felt really heavy. And again, we talked to like friends and family about it. My family weren't physically there, but were supportive. But it was really, I guess, interesting looking back on it now, the different responses we had from people in relation to it. So when we said that, he was going to have to come early because he'd stopped growing, we had some people saying, oh, yay, that's really exciting. Like, we just get to meet baby sooner. And I was like, oh my goodness, he wouldn't be coming now if it wasn't for the fact that he's at risk, and there was one point I think I'd had all these messages about it that I just found really kind of invalidating and dismissive. And I just remember being on my bed, just crying, just being like, what is going on? Like,
Yeah.
this is horrendous. And people that you might often look to for support weren't supportive in the way I think that you would hope, I guess. And, I can look back at it now and think, well, actually, that's got nothing to do with me or the situation. That's about their own journey with how comfortable they are with difficult emotions and situations. And yeah, but at the time, it was very like gut wrenching and heart wrenching. I
Did
just
they
want
know
some
the risks
support
of
here.
stillbirth that you, yeah. Did they know the risks of the stillbirth and things, like all those, like, heavy
Yeah,
consequences and pressures that you were feeling?
yeah. So we'd told them about the risks of him dying, which is why we were needing to get him out sooner. I think, yeah, for whatever reason, it just didn't hit home, or it was too difficult for them to be able to sit with themselves. So I think that was all they could manage, was the, oh yeah, he's going to be here sooner, when I
Mm.
was sitting with the he might not get here safely part.
Yeah.
So yeah, it felt like a lot, and it felt like, I think I said, just really isolating. I just felt quite alone with it. And we did in the end choose to do the daily monitoring. Again, it felt a bit like, and I know rationally it's not about that, but it just did feel a bit like the obstetrician put it back in our court. So then if something did happen, it was on us. I don't know. That's just it felt like it was always going to be on us if something went wrong, or well, we
Yeah.
chose to wait the extra week, or um, but yeah. So I went in daily for all the extra monitoring, but it just felt like life was on hold, so I couldn't do or plan anything because I was on edge that might be going in and not coming out. Something they
Yeah.
might pick up something wrong, and that was me in hospital. So
Was the
it
hospital
felt
far from
like
your house?
No, so Guernsey, very lucky that it was probably 10, 15 minutes. So, and Guernsey's a really small island, so I think the most you're driving anywhere is maybe half an hour max.
Yeah.
So that felt good in terms of there wasn't a big, if something did feel wrong, we could get in like pretty quickly.
Yeah.
It just, I think, felt like I was in this weird limbo of
Mm.
everything's kind of stopped. I don't want to plan to meet up with a friend in case I can't do it and I have to, I don't know. It felt like
Yeah.
everything was just standing still, just waiting, and the pressure kind of building. And I think part of me was sort of in a bit of shock still around the information that we'd been told, and we're continually, so every time I was up there, it was again repeated, repeated, repeated. The chances of stillbirth and that small babies don't tend to cope well with natural labour. So I think I was very much functioning from kind of a fear space, really, just fear of
Mm.
everything that could go wrong, basically.
So it didn't feel empowering when the doctors, were putting it back on you to make a choice. That just felt too overwhelming.
Really overwhelming. It felt like they didn't, I don't know, it felt to me as though I was looking for them to make kind of a medical judgment based on, you know, medical advice, best practice, all of that kind of thing. And it was kind of like, well, here you go. You can make this choice. They weren't saying we advise you
Yeah.
to do X or Y. They just said, literally, here are your options.
Did you ask for their sort of advice, or did you just kind of not know to ask, or how did you deal with that?
We we kind of talked it back and forth with the obstetrician,
Mm.
and it effectively came to we can't really advise you either way. There are pros and cons of both. Ideally, you want baby to stay in longer, but then there are
Yeah.
risks around that. So I think we tried as much as we could. I still probably feel like we were functioning from kind of a place of shock as well. But it didn't really feel like we were getting much to go off, if that made sense. It was just kind of
Yeah.
like, well, either way, there's a
There's
risk
risks.
either way. Like, yeah,
Yeah, and it's
there
first time
didn't seem to
parents,
be any
right?
winning. Yeah, and
Yeah, as
again,
first
we
time
had
parents, it's a
no
lot.
concept.
Mm.
So, yeah, I don't know. It again, in hindsight, could we have pushed more? Probably. I don't know.
Hindsight's a hard game, eh?
It's really difficult, and I think again, the location of where we were, it's probably considered more like a regional hospital.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, it's funny because it seemed as though it wasn't something that they come across very often.
Yeah, which isn't reassuring, I guess, for you.
No, and they probably have, and I know other people in Guernsey that had similar experiences, but yeah, it just felt like such a responsibility to
Mm.
make either way when there were risks either way. What on earth was going to be
Yeah.
the best one? I'm not even sure what the tipping point was of why, but we did choose to hold out the extra week to try and get to 38 weeks, rightly or wrongly. And interestingly enough, because I know that ultrasounds can vary as to accuracy around it, they were bang on with their expected weight that he was. He was literally, I think, within, I don't know, 20 grams off of what they'd said.
Mm.
Uh, so, yeah, we made it to 38 weeks, so we made it through the week. So that was reassuring. And we then started the induction process. So one thing I do feel really grateful for is the antenatal classes that I'd done. They were led by a midwife, hypnobirthing, but again, just very much evidence-based, and these are literally all of the options on the table. This is factually all of the information. It was really thorough, really in-depth, so I felt quite prepared that I understood what an induction was. I understood what can happen with an induction and things like that. So that felt positive that I kind of had that information to begin with, and I could make decisions, I think, quite informed. I could, I think, advocate for myself in that respect. So we had, and again, it's possibly different here, but I had the prostaglandin pessary. Nothing really happened to begin with, but then I started violently vomiting non-stop and didn't stop from that point onwards. I think that might have been, I don't know, 10 hours later after I'd had it in.
Jeez.
And yeah, I literally got to the point of I just couldn't lift my head off the bed. Like there was nothing. I was keeping not even like a sip of water down. It was, yeah, it's the sickest I think I've ever been. It was grim. And yeah, unfortunately, I got very, very dehydrated, and they didn't try to give me an IV until I was horrendously dehydrated. So I became a bit of a pincushion for them to try and get a line in. They had to get the obstetrician who, yes, it was, I think, about 5 midwives tried, got the obstetrician in. He then swapped to a thinner needle and managed to get one, I think, on the inside of my forearm, which then I found out later actually was no good for a C-section. They had to give me another one. But anyway, it meant that I got some fluids in, so that was useful. But my son by that point had started showing signs of distress, so I was being pretty heavily monitored. And yeah, I remember the obstetrician coming in and looking at the monitoring and was concerned, but then his exact words were, well, I'm willing to take the risk. And I sat there and I was like, yeah, but I'm not. So by that point, they had started trying to get me to go on the synthetic oxytocin, that the name's escaping me right now, the drip. And again, which is where I was really thankful, I kind of knew from my classes that how intense and the escalation with the synthetic oxytocin and how different that is to kind of a normal progression. And I just knew that physically I did not have it in, like I could barely move to go to the toilet. Like my body was knackered. I couldn't lift my head off the pillow. And I just kind of knew I wasn't going to be able to do any more with progressing a labour. And just the comment, like, I'm willing to take the risk. So you're telling me there's a big risk still here. You've been telling me it happened to be the same one that we saw who confirmed the fetal growth restriction. And he's literally said to me the concerns around these small babies with a vaginal labour, like, why are we talking about being willing to take the risk? It just was so bizarre to me. So I refused. I just said, look, no, I'm calling it here. I think we need to go to a C-section. I think we just need to, at this point, get him out. And so from that point onwards, I felt like, I don't know if I want to say bully, but a little bit bullied by, I think I saw 3 obstetricians all up, and obviously multiple different midwives who were on the ward who were actively trying to steer me away from a C-section and wanting me to go on the drip, wanting to manually break my waters. And I don't know, I just felt like I was in this really weird space of, I don't really understand what's going on here. Like,
Yeah.
you've been continuing, all of you telling me for so long, all of these things that can go wrong. Why are we now going in the exact opposite direction?
Yeah.
And I kind of felt a bit like I was being, that classic, like, hysterical, what we treated like, that I was like hysterical and hormonal or not
Mm.
able to make decisions. Like, my husband had stepped out for a little bit, had gone home. And one of the obstetricians was like, "Oh, should we wait for your husband to come back before we make any decisions?" And I was like, "No,
Yeah.
we've discussed it. He's on board with me.
Yeah.
Why do we? I'm perfectly capable of making a decision." And like,
Yeah.
I know I wasn't being hysterical or overly emotional because I physically wasn't able to anyway. Even if I wanted to,
Yeah.
I had nothing
Exhausted.
in me. I had no energy. Yeah, I was beyond it. And again, I think I thank a little bit of my professional background because I found it really challenging, but I felt able to say no.
Yeah.
I, I felt confident to say, actually, thanks, but no thanks. We need to do something
Mm.
else. Not that it made any kind of immediate, um, made it any better, but I felt like I could say something. Uh, it then got to a point, one of the obstetricians came back and he was laboring through all of the risks around a C-section. And again, like, I know they have to do that. That's really important. Like, you have to tell someone about the risks. It just felt, again, a bit like they were trying to put me off. Like, these
Yeah.
are the awful things that can go wrong with a C-section. Like, you really don't want to do it. And I said, look, I don't particularly want a C-section. I never wanted a C-section. I had in my mind a lovely, relaxed water birth with all my nice music, like, I wanted something
Yeah.
really calm and relaxed. That's off the cards. I don't want a C-section. I need a C-section. I think this is what's going to be the best. Like, I understand these risks, and I still think we need
Yeah.
to go ahead. And then he kind of had this funny look on his face, and he looked at me and was like, just out of interest, what do you do for a job? And I said, well, I'm a social worker. I work for children's services, blah, blah. And then he just sort of like, kind of like switched. He had a great smile on his face. I was like, oh, well, of course you understand risk. Like, yeah, no problem. Like, I'll see what I can do to get you in tonight. Because at that point it was kind of getting to early evening. And I was like, what on earth has just happened here? My job has nothing to do with my ability
Yeah.
to
Make a
request
decision.
something, yeah, for my birth. But it was then almost as though it switched to, I was almost treated a bit more like a colleague. He was like, yeah, I'm going to try and squeeze you in tonight, rah, rah, rah. And I was just,
Mm.
I,
And stopped fighting against you.
yeah, it was then the pressure was off. No one was trying to continue to push for me to go on the drip or anything like that. It was then just
Yeah.
we have to wait for a slot. And I was just like, this makes no sense to me. I have not been acting any differently between now and then.
Yeah.
It was bizarre. It just kind of, the whole experience, I just felt like, am I the one that's kind of losing my mind here? Because everything else seems completely wild.
Mm.
It was, yeah, really,
Yeah.
really weird. And yeah, which I'm glad kind of the pressure came off because I was pretty exhausted from having to push back a lot. But
Yeah.
then,
And also physically exhausted, no
oh,
doubt, from
I was just
being
done.
so
Yeah,
sick.
I was really, really done.
Was your
And
husband back at this stage? Was he there when you were kind of fighting against all these people, or was he there for part of it?
he
You said
he
he
was
stepped out
there
for a
kind
bit.
of earlier on, and
Mm-hmm.
then he stepped out. So I don't. I feel like he was a bit overwhelmed. I think with everything that was going on, he completely backed me up, which was good, but I think he probably missed the more intense stuff
Yeah.
with the obstetricians. I think a lot of it happened to be when he had gone. And I'm not in any way suggesting that was deliberate, but yeah,
Yeah.
he wasn't there for a lot of that. And again, I think, you know, we don't know what would have happened. I do feel quite strongly if I had not advocated for myself at that particular time, that not necessarily that, the extreme that he would have died, but I think that it would have been heavily traumatic,
Yeah.
that experience. And I do very strongly feel that we would have ended up in the same place. So
Yeah.
funnily enough, my waters, so things must have been working in the background anyway. My waters broke. They all then went into a massive flap and were like, right, we're getting you in for a C-section now. And suddenly then everyone was very concerned about how my son was presenting and the level of distress he was in through the monitoring, which hadn't vastly changed from earlier when everyone was telling me that they were happy to carry on. But I remember as I was getting prepped in theatre, the anaesthetist said to me, and again, I don't know, you take it with a grain of salt, but he was like, look, with how your son's kind of presenting, you probably would have ended up here in the middle of the night in an actual emergency. So, this was probably the best decision. And it was kind of
Yeah.
the first time through that whole period, because we were into the second day, the evening of the second day at this point. And it was the first time that I think I felt kind of validated
Mm-hmm.
and supported, and like,
Yeah.
like I'm not going mad here. Like, someone can see what's going
Yeah.
on, and yay, okay, we made a good choice. This is what needed to happen. But yeah, I had to call my husband when my waters broke to be like, right, we're going into theatre. You need to get back ASAP. And again, very grateful that Guernsey's small because he was able to get back in time and he was able to be there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was all like a mad panic and a real rush, and everyone was quite stressed. Again, the staff around monitoring and checking my son. But that whole process of the C-section felt like the first time in 2 days, or even probably the 3 weeks that all of this had been going on, that things actually felt a little bit more in control.
Yeah.
We had a plan, things were going ahead, and I think as well, I don't know, maybe for other people, there's a huge number of people in a C-section. That almost felt comforting in terms of, okay, well, there are people there. If he wasn't okay, it was going to get picked
Yeah.
up. He was going to get looked after really quickly.
Yeah.
So he didn't make any noises when he was born. He needed to go, and he was whipped straight off to the resus table, needed oxygen. But thankfully, he perked up, and I was able to be with him in recovery.
Mm-hmm.
He was born at 2.4 kg. Like I say, was bang on what I think at the
Yeah.
37-week scan was what they expected him to be. So was technically class less than first centile. And yeah, so I was beyond grateful that he was alive and relatively fine, like very lucky
Mm.
that he was okay. He didn't have, I think there was, I don't know if it was as much, well, there was one traumatic bit, I would say, in relation to his feeding. Um, but we got very little support around his size and the difficulties with feeding and all of that kind of stuff. We had was a couple of really great midwives. We had a really great midwife who put in a really good plan around triple feeding and top ups and things like that, because he was starving.
Yeah.
Bless him. But then change of shift, someone else came in, then tried like forcing him on my breast, trying to force him to latch. He was screaming, like it was horrendous. And
Mm.
she'd stopped my access to formula, so I couldn't top him up.
Which you had been doing with the previous shift.
Yeah, and working really well.
Yeah.
And it was horrendous. Again, it happened to be my husband had gone home to do washing and things like that. I think it was day two. And then he came back and I just like, I think broke down, like burst into floods of tears, like, oh my
Yeah.
God, like this was awful. Like, and I'd never said like, I need to breastfeed. Like, we had a plan, like, he needs to be fed.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't getting food whilst inside me. And then, funnily enough, that same midwife who'd been really great and had put in loads of really good plans, she came back on shift that afternoon.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, and she walked in and she was like, "Why does this baby look starving?" And again, I broke down and was like, "This
Yeah.
is what's happened." And she was like, utterly professional with me. She's like, "Okay, like, don't panic. I'm going to go and get you some formula and I'm going to go, like, I'm going to handle it."
Mm-hmm.
And I think words were had. um, she wasn't overly impressed. I think she was quite a senior midwife. Um, and it didn't happen again. And another midwife came in um, as well for the evening, who I think had been explaining what had happened, and she was just wonderful. And she gave me a big hug, and she's like, "Don't worry about it. We've got this."
Nice.
Yeah, that was like huge. When I was just like, I think at that point I was so drained and exhausted. I didn't advocate for us, and
Yeah. But
then
also first time
you kind
parents,
of,
right? First time parents, you don't know. It's like a lot, and you just kind of go off what the medical experts tell you.
yeah, I think when she was like forcing, like literally holding his head, forcing him on me,
Mm.
and he was screaming, and I was like, I know this is not right. This is not
Yeah.
okay. Like, why are we stressing out this tiny baby who has no energy at all anyway? Uh, yeah, I think part of me again was a bit of like self blame around like I shouldn't have let that happen. That just wasn't okay.
Yeah.
Um, so that was kind of something else to unpack around that, and we didn't really get any support around the feeding. Like that was probably the most we had, and I was screaming out for support. Like they don't have, may have changed now. They didn't have a lactation consultant within the hospital, within the system there.
Mm.
And having had another small baby with my most recent one, and the stark difference in support that we've had with her, it's really, really highlighted the gap. And we kind of just made it up, and it worked. And I since like understood around, he didn't have the muscle tone to be able to latch at that point, didn't have the energy.
Yeah.
Um, it wasn't going
Did
to happen at that point.
did he need to have a NICU stay or anything, or did he just? How many days were you in hospital for after the birth?
So we were in hospital for 3 days. He wasn't in NICU. I would imagine if we were here, he possibly would have. Just my experience doing it again this time with my daughter. Uh, thankfully, we bumbled through and it was okay. I triple fed for 6 weeks, maybe. And I never felt that I had to breastfeed. I didn't feel any pressure in that way, but he desperately wanted to, like he was constantly trying. So I thought, well, do you know what? I'm going to give this a go. If it works, great. If not, then at least I know that we've tried. Um,
Yeah.
and thankfully, I think it was by maybe 5 weeks, um, he had built up enough because he came out with literally he was quite skeletal. There was no fat shred of fat on him. He'd built
Yeah.
up enough kind of fat stores and energy and muscle tone in his jaw, and he was able to latch. And then I think over the next kind of week or so, we like reduced down the top ups. We were then able to go to exclusively breastfeeding, and I carried on breastfeeding him till he was 3
Yeah,
in
good
some
effort.
capacity. So that felt like a big win, but very unsupported in that
Yeah.
endeavor, which was really tough. And I remember like saying to my friend, like, I feel like I'm screaming out for help. Like, I've asked numerous times, can someone please come out and help me? And I was told, oh, well, there's
Mm.
this like public breastfeeding clinic up at the family center you can like pop along to. And I was like, I just need someone to come to my house. I don't want to sit up there with, you know, 5, 10 other strangers I don't know. I just need someone to come and
Yeah.
help
Help
me.
you one to one.
Yeah. Um, and that didn't happen, but we figured it out. Um,
So how was his growth trajectory? Did he like stack on the weight or did he kind of stay consistent?
so he pounded on the way up to, which I think is probably where he naturally would have sat. He's hovered around kind of the 25th centile, but
Yeah.
that initial period was like huge growth. Like he
Yeah.
just, yeah, put it on. So yeah, he was starving. He wasn't getting
Mm.
what he needed to, sadly, which happened again with my daughter. I don't think,
Yeah.
yeah, my placentas clearly aren't great, but that's okay. Um, we, but then in the flip side of that, going through it all again with my daughter, with some differences, but a lot of similarities, it was almost quite healing because we got a lot of answers that we never got the first time round. And
Mm.
I didn't realize quite how much I still needed that. Like,
Was she born in
we,
New Zealand or
yeah,
overseas
so
still?
she was born in New Zealand, so she was born in Christchurch
Mm.
um, 3 months ago. Yeah, so still very little.
Still fresh.
Um, yes, and that whole experience, just polar opposites, so different. Um,
Mm.
and even because thinking about the support we had postnatally, it was just, again, because you don't have an LMC, you're not getting the same person coming to visit you for 6 weeks. You get someone, no, you don't get someone, you get a level of support for 10 weeks. Not 10 weeks, 10 days. 10 days, and it's just whoever's available from the ward,
Back with your first
basically.
son?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, it just might have been a support worker who came out from the ward because that was who was available at that point in time. Yeah, it was such a different and wild experience.
Yeah.
Um,
And it
but
must have
yeah,
been hard because I'm sure every person comes with their own advice and their own sort of ways to do stuff, right? To
yes. So
then
you
sort
were
of
getting
also, yeah, just
something
to figure out what
different.
you do.
Yeah, something different every time. And again, very, very blessed that my experience through my job, I've worked a lot with parents, mums, babies, children. So I felt like I wasn't coming from a blank slate. So that felt like, okay, well, this bit I can do. Like
Mm.
I can kind of bumble along, I can manage. I have some level of insight, obviously not experiencing any of it physically, but I have some idea to go off. So I didn't feel like I was starting from scratch again, which I feel like helped me immensely because I don't know if I hadn't have had some of that, it would have felt possibly a little bit more overwhelming, especially around the feeding. And he also had cow's milk protein allergy. So that was a whole other ball game around formula and added another extra layer
Yeah.
that actually it was really useful to be able to breastfeed so we didn't have to worry about trialing different allergy formulas and things like that. Um, but yeah,
So
so
then
that,
after in the postpartum with your son, did you reach out to anyone about like psychological support or, just talk therapy about what happened?
yeah, so I actually did that which I didn't mention, is I did that after I initially found out about the fetal growth restriction.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Again, because there's so much privilege in it, isn't there? That I had enough self-awareness and the education and resources to be able to seek that out. I sought
Privately.
that out, privately. So that would be one big thing that at no point throughout that journey did anyone ever stop to say, "Are you guys okay?" Or "Do you need any support?" Or just, "Hey, if at any point you do feel like you need support, here's the people you can reach
Yeah.
out to." We had nothing, nothing at all. And I just remember sitting there like, why? Like,
Yeah.
why are we not
It's a
getting
pretty
offered
big thing.
anything? Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I think when I could feel myself starting to spiral in that kind of self blame and the panic around the possibility of him dying, and I think the continued conversation from professionals about it, I was like, whoa, okay, stop. I need to speak to
Mm.
someone. And again, I had built in relationships with therapists that I could contact her and be like, hey, can I please have an urgent appointment? this
Yeah.
is, yeah, this is spiraling and I need to do something about it now. And again, I'd seen a lot of parents and worked with a lot of parents who'd entered parenting with their own trauma or going through traumatic experiences around those pregnancies or birth. And I've seen, I suppose, the like far end of what can go wrong, I guess, like
Mm.
how things can really impact you. And it was really important to me that I would do as much as I could to try and avoid spiraling down. I wanted to be able to be present with my son. I wanted to be able to go into
Yeah.
parenting not burdened with kind of that trauma. Again,
Yeah.
very
So,
very lucky that I was able to kind of still rationalize a bit of that.
and how many sessions or like how long were you seeing someone for? Do you remember?
So I just did the one session before he arrived, which tied me over, and that was kind of what I needed to still get by,
Yeah.
I think. And then uh, again, I probably only had two or three after he arrived.
Yeah.
I think again useful that I had that inbuilt relationship with her, so I wasn't starting to build a new relationship from scratch. I could just go
Yeah.
straight. She knew me well, and I could just go straight
Yeah.
into it. But I value doing that so highly. It was huge to be able to unpack how I was feeling, to step out of that panic and the trauma and the fear, and to
Yeah.
process it properly, because I think that's the problem. I wasn't processing anything. I was quite stuck. I was stuck in that, my my lid had been flipped. I was in survival mode. I was panicked, and I was able to kind of regulate and come down and not spiral, I think,
Yeah.
and just process a little bit more. And doing that again after he arrived was crucial. And it's funny because I think part of me kind of questions, which is ridiculous, was my trauma because I didn't end up with PTSD. I did something about it. I processed it. Is it still valid trauma? You kind of
Yeah. It's
question
like if it
yourself
was
around that.
traumatic, it was traumatic. I feel like
Yeah,
that's full stop. Like the whole comparing and the whole, mine turned out okay or whatever, however you want to think about it, is like, no, if it was traumatic to you, it's traumatic, Like,
yeah, And I tell clients that, and it's like, sometimes we forget to give ourselves like some of
Yeah.
that grace, right? Um, but yeah,
Or even if you like you felt fine about it or whatever, but it was still a traumatic experience. It's still traumatic.
yeah, particularly those, and there was probably other parts after he arrived, but those 3 weeks before he arrived and, the days around his birth just felt hugely traumatic to me. And it was, I think, that
Mm.
powerlessness, that lack of control, that just hypervigilance around, I don't know, somehow trying to magically know how he was doing and that he would be okay and that he wouldn't die, and feeling like I wouldn't be able to stop that from happening.
And I imagine going from having like a pregnancy that was smooth running up until that point, like you've kind of just, lived with the fact that everything was going to be fine and it was going to be healthy and a normal experience,
Mm.
to then have this thrown upon you is like, whoa, what?
Yeah, I think that was the big shock factor, is there was no
Yeah.
lead up to it. There's no like little indications. I kind of wonder now, having gone through this again with my daughter, if certain things, because we didn't end up having the first trimester screening, which I can
Mm.
talk a bit about my daughter's birth, but because they couldn't get a clear view of his nuchal fold, they just didn't do the screening at all. Whereas I kind of wonder if they had done that, they may have picked up, which we did with my daughter, the low PAPA levels, which isn't diagnostic, but it can indicate further issues with like your placenta and issues around preeclampsia and growth restriction.
Mm.
Um, and we had that with my daughter, and I pinged up very high risk for a chromosomal abnormality. So we went on to maternal fetal medicine, had a
Mm-hmm.
amazing consult there, and further testing for the chromosomes. Chromosomes all came back fine, but what it turns out is that it was indicative of my placental functioning. And I had a really great conversation with the midwife there about, she was like, look, given your history and given what happened with your first birth, it's standalone, it's not clinically significant to be able to kind of diagnose anything, but it looks likely that this might be an issue that you might have later on.
Yeah.
So we had that heads up from, even though already we knew that there was a risk that would happen again, and I was prepared for a high risk pregnancy, we had that from, whenever we did that, like 12 weeks, we
Yeah.
had that mindset already to know, okay, we're likely to head down a similar path.
Yeah.
And it's likely what happened the first time, that, my placenta was not functioning
Just kind of being
adequately.
prepared, I think. Like being prepared or just like having it on your radar that early on is just, I feel like, would make such a huge difference rather than it getting sprung on you at the last minute.
It was a game changer. Just my that pregnancy was also very complicated, but at no point I didn't feel any part of it was traumatic, even though I think probably if that had happened the first time round, it would
Yeah.
have probably have been quite traumatic. Um, but just having that, what we'd experienced, similar the first time round, albeit over a very short period of time. Don't get me wrong, with her pregnancy, I kind of got mental fatigue around being forever in limbo, issues cropping up, but it wasn't traumatic. It wasn't this shock out of nowhere. And yeah, it was, we were suddenly going from walking up to the ward, kind of laughing and joking about stuff, to then the panic
Yeah.
of like, oh, okay, this is something's potentially terribly wrong, and we now need to start worrying.